Hi, Kinder Kids, it's Miss Johnson again. We are picking up with chapter 6 in our Midnight on the Moon story with Jack and Annie. Now, I'm going to do a quick recap of what's happened from the beginning to now. Last week, we spent the whole week reading up through chapter 5. So let's see if we can refresh our brains with everything that's happened so far. So we've got Jack and Annie who wake up in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, and they get dressed so that they can go to the magic tree house. And once they get there, they say hello to Peanut, of course, their little mouse. And they find a book that they can hardly read because it's so dark until they see the title in big letters. It's called Hello Moon. And of course, they wish to go there, and the treehouse spins and spins and spins, and then they land in a white room with curved ceilings and no windows. Jack finds a map that he makes a copy of, and they start to realize that they're on something called a moon base. Now, on this moon base, of course, Annie goes to explore, and she wants to go out the door, and then Jack has to remind her that she can't go out the door just yet because the moon doesn't have air. They can't breathe. And then they find the spacesuit storeroom, and they put on their suit and their air tanks and their gloves and their boots and their helmets, and they eventually step out onto the moon. And while they're there, they find a moon buggy inside of a crater, and Annie, of course it's Annie, starts to drive the moon buggy. She goes between some mountains, and they get to a spot where they see a telescope and the American flag where people have been on the moon before. And Jack and Annie leave a message saying that they're the first kids to be here. They sign their names, and then they look through the telescope and they see something floating above the ground in the distance, and from where we stand, it's looking a lot like a moon man or an astronaut. So that's where we're picking up with chapter 6 to see what happens next with Jack and Annie. Chapter 6 is called High Jump. "Who is that?" said Jack. "I don't know," said Annie, "but we'll soon find out. She started waving." "No," said Jack. He grabs her arm. "Let's go back to the base before he gets here." "Why?" said Annie. "We don't know who he is," said Jack. "We don't know if he's friendly or mean or what." "But we can't go back," said Annie. "We haven't found the fourth end thing yet." "We won't be able to go home." "It doesn't matter. We can lock the door at the moon base until he goes away," said Jack. "Then we can get new air tanks." Jack hurried to the moon buggy. "Come on!" He jumped into the driver's seat. Annie gave a little wave to the dot in the sky. Then she climbed into the moon buggy, and the buggy took off. "Careful," said Annie. They bumped over the rocks as Jack turned the buggy around. Then they zoomed toward the pass. Jack steered around the craters and rocks. More than once, the buggy nearly tipped over. "Whoa, slow down," said Annie. They were almost at the mountain pass. Suddenly, a cloud of dust flew up in front of them. The ground trembled. "Watch it," cried Annie. Jack couldn't see a thing. He stepped on the brake. The buggy jerked to a stop. The dust settled. A giant rock had fallen into the narrow pass. It was stuck between two walls of rock. They were trapped. Jack quickly quickly found a picture of a giant rock in the moon book. He read aloud, "Rocks of all sizes crash into the moon from outer space. These rocks are called meteorites." What are those rocks called? Meteorites. "We're lucky that meteorite didn't land on us," said Jack. "Yeah, and I guess it's too big to be the end thing," said Annie. She had climbed out of the moon buggy and was standing by the meteorite. It was more than twice as tall as she was. Jack looked at the black sky. The flying thing was nowhere in sight yet. "We'll have to jump over it," Annie said. "Jump? I don't think so," said Jack. "It's too high." "I'm gonna try anyway," said Annie. "Wait, let's think first," said Jack. But Annie was already backing up. 1, 2, 3, go! She shouted and took giant leaping steps towards the meteorite. When Annie got close to the rock, she pushed off the ground. Then she flew through space and disappeared behind the meteorite. "Annie!" Jack called. There was no answer. "Oh, brother," Jack said. He backed up and took off toward the rock. He jumped as high as he could. Then he was flying through space. Jack hit the ground and fell face down into the dust. Jack tried to stand, but his suit was too bulky. He tried to roll over, but his suit made even that impossible. "Oh no," he groaned. "Not again." "Are you here?" asked Annie. "Did you make it?" "Yes." Jack was relieved to hear her voice, but he couldn't turn his head to see her. He could only hear her over the radio. "Can you help me up?" he asked. "Nope," said Annie. "Why not?" "I fell down too," she said. "Oh, brother," Jack sighed. "Now we're really in trouble." He tried to stand again and failed. "Can you see anything?" he asked. "Just the sky," said Annie. "Wow, is it weird?" "I'm worried about our air tanks," said Jack. "I feel like it's been 2 hours. Jack," said Annie. And what about that moon man?" said Jack. Where did he go?" "Jack," whispered Annie. "What?" "He's here," she said. "The moon man, he's here." "What?" "He's standing, Jack, he's standing above me." That's the end of chapter 6. With Jack and Annie stuck on the ground and the moon man standing over Annie. What do you think's gonna happen next? Do you think they're in trouble? Do you think he's gonna help them? Do you think he's gonna send them back to Earth? I don't know. Keep watching and find out. Bye, Kinder Kids.